Hey, what's up, everybody? Izzy here. Going to do episode number 16 and a half, 16.5 of another effing podcast. Dan Epstein was in on Sunday, and the first 20 minutes or so of the interview, a little microphone issue, user error on my part, so we missed all the good shit, him talking about Kiss and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because he's not only a sports book writer, but he also writes mainly music stuff for Revolver and Rolling Stone magazine. So we got a nice conversation about Rolling Stone and the Hall of Fame and Kiss and all that stuff. And you'll be able to find that interview via print via my website, izzypresleyproductions.com. I'm going to have that up in a couple days. But what I wanted to do was take the second part of the interview when the microphone issue was fixed. And the most important part, actually, because he's talking about his book, Stars and Stripes, Baseball and America in the Bicentennial Summer of 76. Very, very cool thing. So I'm gonna play that for you, and I think you're really going to enjoy that. Nice little conversation about that book and the year 1976 and baseball and everything that was kind of going on during the Bicentennial. You're going to enjoy it. But first, check out rockstarleatherworks.com. Go buy yourself a leather band or watch. Tell them Izzy sent you. Hairball Online. Check out their dates coming up. And, of course, the KISS podcast, Three Sides of the Coin. If you want to contribute to the show, izzy.presley@gmail.com is the PayPal. That's izzy.presley@gmail.com. And I'm going to jump into the intro and then jump right in to the Dan Epstein interview regarding his brand new book, which drops on April 29th. It's called Stars and Strikes, Baseball and America in the Bicentennial Summer of 76.
You kids with your loud music and your Dan Fogelberg, your Zima, hula hoops, and Pac-Man video games, don't you see? People today have attention spans that can only be measured in nanoseconds.
All right, everybody, Izzy Presley here, episode 16 and a half of another effing podcast with me, Izzy Presley. It's good to see you and always good to be seen. As promised, here is the Dan Epstein interview that I recorded on Sunday and had those mic issues. This is Dan Epstein talking about his brand new book called Stars and Strikes, Baseball in America in the Bicentennial Summer of 1976. Enjoy. Hurt Locker is Dan Epstein. His brand new book is called Stars and Strikes, Baseball in America
in the Bicentennial Summer
of 1976. What was it about 1976 that just kind of drew you to it?
Oh, so much, man. I mean, just like from a baseball perspective, it's huge. It's not only the season where Mark Fidrich comes out of nowhere and has this fantastic rookie year and just like captures the popular imagination, but it's also the kind of end of the line for the Oakland A's, who were kind of like the dynastic team of the 70s. Charlie Finley, their owner, dismantles them in the face of oncoming full-scale free agency. It's the last year before free agency kicks in, so it's as just in terms of economic transition, it's huge. Like, you know, if you want to understand why ball players have such hyperinflated salaries today, you got to look back to 1976 to see where the craziness all started. It's the year where the Yankees returned to the postseason for the first time since the Johnson administration. It's the second World Series in a row won by the Big Red Machine, which was really the other great team of the 70s. It's the year where the Phillies and the Royals kind of all of a sudden become contenders and, you know, will be so for, you know, the next decade on and off. It's the year where George Steinbrenner really kind of he'd been suspended for a couple of years because of illegal donations to the Nixon re-election campaign. So, but he comes back in '76 and really like starts the whole Bronx Zoo craziness. Hires Billy Martin, and hilarity ensues. Bill Veeck buys the White Sox for the second time, and reignites the Chicago's fondness for the franchise with all kinds of crazy promotions.
That wasn't the Shorts year, was it?
That was the Shorts year. That was one of so he runs the White Sox out there in shorts for 3 games, which no White Sox fan will ever be able to get out of their minds. The image of Goose Gossage taking the mound in shorts. They should really have those shorts in the Hall of Fame. I don't know why they don't. And Ted Turner takes over. That's the year he takes over the Braves and does all kinds of crazy shit there. He, has all these promotions, ostrich races, and at one point they have what they call a headlock and wedlock night, it was originally supposed to be a home plate wedding promotion where a bunch of couples get married at the plate before the game, but they accidentally double booked it with a wrestling thing. So they had a wedding at home plate before the game, and then they had Georgia Championship Wrestling afterwards. So headlock and wedlock.
That is hilarious.
So it's just all kinds of stuff like that. The Red Sox are they're coming off they're winning the pennant the year before, but they're having problems, and at one point a Boston radio station hires a Salem witch to remove like whatever curse has been placed on them, and just all kinds of really nutty things that have some which people remember, a lot of which people have kind of forgotten about.
It almost seems like not minor league, but like the Minnesota has the St. Paul Saints.
Sure,
it's like
Mike Veeck's team.
Yeah, it's almost like indie league stuff.
Yeah,
it's what it feels like.
Well, it was it was much freer and crazier in the '70s. Really in everything, but. There wasn't this sort of like very rigid where like, Major League Baseball has to approve everything that happens. Right. And, at the time, the two leagues were completely, American League and National League, were run by completely different people. So they didn't even agree on anything. So like, getting them all to go, okay, well, we'll, do X amount of T-shirt giveaways or whatever. It didn't work like that then. It was really more of an anything goes kind of thing. Charlie Finley hired an astrologer for the A's to help his manager make out the most astrologically compatible lineup. You don't hear about anything like that happening these days. But there were 1976 was just brimming with this kind of craziness.
Now you brought up Mark the Bird Fidrich. He wasn't around that long. No,
he actually didn't even. He came up as a rookie that season, but he only pitched twice in like April and early May. Didn't even get his first start till May 15th.
Okay.
And he still wound up winning 19 games. Had a 234 earned run average. Really things. News spread so differently in the mid 70s as opposed to now. Now it's like you get like 1 or 2 games of Mark Fidrich talking to the ball and dropping to his knees to smooth out the tracks in the mound and shaking hands with his infielders every time they made a good play. Like that would be all over SportsCenter. Right. And by his 5th start, like we would all know everything about him and we'd actually be kind of sick about him, but sick of him. But at this point, in 1976, it was this kind of word of mouth thing. I was growing up in Ann Arbor, Michigan at the time. So like, it was this sort of thing where after he made his first start, like there were these sort of rumbles like, did you hear about the guy who pitched for the Tigers the other night? Stuff like this. And then it's not really till the end of June where he makes his quote unquote national debut. He's pitching on Monday Night Baseball against the Yankees.
Now, just to pause you for a second, I don't think a lot of people from this generation realize what that was. That there was one night of baseball a week.
Yeah.
And it was like Monday Night Football, except it was Monday Night Baseball. It wasn't. You didn't get all the home games. You didn't get all that shit. It was once.
Right. Well, you got game of the week
Yeah.
on the weekend, and and if you were lucky to live in a city or near a city that televised some of its team's home games, you might, it's like in Ann Arbor, we would get the occasional Tigers game on TV, usually weekends. The Braves were kind of under Ted Turner were the first team to really broadcast most of their games.
Right.
But yeah, in the mid 70s, it was just like you took what you got and you were glad for it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, anyways, continue with Mr. Fidrich.
So Mark Fidrich, so by now there's this huge buzz on him. It's like, wow, there's this crazy guy who talks to the baseball, and it's like, and he looks like Big Bird from Sesame Street, and he's pitching for the Tigers, who completely suck, but every time he takes the mound for them, they win. So he goes up against the Yankees, who pretty much from out of the gate have been leading the American League East and all season, and really tough team. It's like Thurman Munson, Chris Chambliss. This is pre-Reggie Jackson,
right?
But but it's a really solid group of players, and they come into Detroit to play against the Tigers and Fidrich on Monday Night Baseball, and Fidrich totally shuts them down. I mean, they get a home run off him, but like he makes the rest of it look easy. Like, I think the game goes for less than 2 hours. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's just really efficient worker, and the Monday Night Baseball audience sees this guy, and he's like running to the mound at the beginning of the inning, and he's running to the dugout at the end of it. And he's got these huge golden curls, and they're flying, and he's this gawky 6'3" beanpole, and his elbows are flying in every direction. And every time one of his teammates makes a great play, he runs over and shakes their hand and slaps them on the back, and he's just radiating so much joy and enthusiasm. I mean, I say it was like, I was playing Little League Baseball at the time, and like that, watching Fidrich was like watching you and your friends, because
right.
he's as happy to be out there as you are to be out, on the diamond after school. And people just fell in love with him. And at that game, after it's all over, this was before the practice of fans calling players out for curtain calls.
Right.
And but the fans at Tiger Stadium, like 50,000 people are in there, like they won't go home until he comes out. And one of his teammates, Rusty Staub, has to convince him to put his clothes back on and go out. And you can see the video on YouTube of when he comes out for the post-game interview and to kind of wave to the fans. And the love and applause and screaming is so intense. Like, you see it, like he almost falls over. It's so powerful. And it's just a beautiful moment. I got goosebumps just talking about it. But so from that point on, he becomes this like national hero, this pop idol. Really, he's like as hot as the Fonz, Dorothy Hamill, and Bruce Jenner rolled into one. It's just like he's everywhere, and so much so that when the Tigers go on the road, general managers from other teams ask them to rejigger their rotation so that he will pitch in their park, because they know if he takes the mound, that's good for like 20,000 more tickets. And the Tigers, I forget the exact amount, but the Tigers wound up like 4th or 5th in overall attendance that year, and this is with a lousy team.
Right.
But almost all of it is through Fidrich and through the games that he pitches. And
so there was nobody in the stands unless he was pitching, pretty much.
Right, pretty much. And I know this for a fact because I went to some games that year when he wasn't pitching.
Right.
And you could like on a Sunday game, you could walk up to the ballpark, buy tickets behind home plate for $4.50,
yep,
and just walk right in, no problem.
Yeah, that's like those lean years in the '90s at the Metrodome too.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Like, just a sea of blue seats and Teflon
and the
carpet,
death-like silence.
Yeah, and fans blowing out.
Yeah, I never saw a game at the Met or at the
at the Dome.
The Dome, yeah.
It had its quirks, and we've got our memories from there.
Right.
the 91 series and the 87 series, the Puckett and we've got our memories in there. It has a soft spot in my heart. I'm glad they're out of it.
Yeah, I love the new park. I have been there. That's
it's. I think you really had to go to Metrodome to really appreciate Target Field. Because watching a game in Metrodome, it was like, okay, so pretend we're in left field, right down the line. We're looking at the left field. We have to do this to look at home.
Right, the angle
was because it was built for football.
Right.
It's just a shit show. But so all right, what else about 76? What else can we dive into?
Well, I mean, I believe that nothing happens in a vacuum, and I'm always, my previous book, Big Hair and Plastic Grass, was about the way that that baseball had been this kind of just in this bubble for decades, and you have no idea that what else is going on in America around it. In the 70s, when the sport and American pop culture kind of collide, and all of a sudden you see this, this spillover onto the field, and you definitely see this in 76. But also 76 is just, just as it's a really important transitional year for baseball, it's a huge transitional year in American culture. It's, in film, this is basically a year that begins with Taxi Driver and ends with Rocky.
Right.
And these are two, both gritty kind of urban dramas, but with very different messages and very different endings. And, and Rocky goes on to influence all these films that are made after it, whereas that whole kind of really downbeat, existentially crushing brand of 70s film, they pretty much stopped making those.
Right.
Musically, you've got the punk scene is starting to happen in New York. Hasn't really broken nationally yet, but that's the Ramones' first record comes out that year.
My roommate plays with Richie, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome. So that record comes out. One of the big records in 1976 is Boston's first album, which comes out in the fall. And both the Ramones record and Boston's record are made for about the same amount of money.
Right.
Yet they're just sonically opposite ends of the spectrum. And but Boston's record really kind of sets the tone for this really lush, super clean, hard rock production for the rest of the decade.
That's like the predecessor. That's kind of what set the precedent for hysteria.
Yeah, it's actually absolutely what I was about to say. Def Leppard, it starts there. Disco hasn't really reached critical mass yet, but it's starting to happen on the charts with the Bee Gees, and Johnny Taylor's Disco Lady becomes the first R&B record to sell 1 million copies, and so that's happening. Hip hop is starting to get going in the Bronx, although nobody outside of the Bronx is aware of what's happening. But they're using Thin Lizzy records to get the beats and so there's all this stuff going on, and all this stuff is happening in New York, which to the rest of the country, New York is this shithole that's about ready to just fall into the Hudson.
Right, it smells like piss.
Right, it's you get mugged there, all this stuff. But in reality, you would get mugged there. But but in reality, there's all this amazing culture happening. So it's sort of like this is the where the rebirth of New York City begins. And then on top of it all, you have the Bicentennial celebrations, which was kind of a you had to be there thing, but it's a period that really fascinates me, because it's that one period I can remember in my life where the U.S. is not at war anywhere in the world, where there's a sense of unity for the most part that I've never seen before or since in America, where it's okay, we made it through the Vietnam years. That sucked. Let's not talk about that. Let's move on, and let's remember all the good stuff about this country, and let's remember that we are the country of Ben Franklin, and we are the country of the Continental Congress. And, we did start this, this amazing experiment 200 years ago. And, it's had its flaws, but it's kind of worked out. And we've, we have all these non-militaristic accomplishments that are really worthwhile. So really, it was about celebrating that and celebrating American history in a way that, you don't see it now. You don't see people talking about like, oh yeah, Bunker Hill, man, that was such a heavy moment, and so like all across America, like every town is having their bicentennial parties. They're painting the fire hydrants, red, white, and blue. They're doing historical reenactments. They're having pie eating contests, doing all this stuff. Baltimore tries to make the world's biggest birthday cake for the celebration, and it winds up getting like all the frosting gets rained off in a sudden storm, and then they refrost it and it's overrun by rats.
Oh, Jesus.
So there's all kinds of just stuff like that, but it's both incredibly cheesy, but there's something really sweet about that.
Right.
And so I'm just fascinated by this, and having lived through it, I thought it was incredibly cool because at the time I was 10 years old. That was the year I really got into baseball. So that was huge. But I was also like this little kid history buff. Like I was always into reading about the Revolution, and
right.
and like now we're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it, and we've got the Bicentennial Minutes on CBS. And
Kiss dressed like it.
Right. We've got Kiss doing the Spirit of '76. Like everybody's doing the Spirit of '76.
Yeah.
Like every magazine is working some kind of star-spangled angle, and whether it's Mad Magazine or Playboy or High Times. Well, actually, I don't think High Times did. I think High Times was probably the only magazine that did not work.
Because they didn't realize what was happening.
Well, I think that might have been. I think that they also like did sort of. I was actually just yesterday looking at the cover of their July 1976 magazine, and they've got like the Illuminati pyramid on the cover. So that was sort of their bicentennial thing. I'm sure there were links to Ben Franklin in that article.
What can baseball learn now from 1976?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for you. I think in a lot of ways, the people who are kind of apologists for baseball now will look at, I think baseball probably draws twice as many people at least as it did in 1976. It's the 70s were where baseball attendance really started to build. I mean, it's hard to remember now, of course, but there was a time when averaging 10,000 fans a game was not uncommon for most major league teams, even in bigger markets. I grew up, spent my high school years in Chicago, and before 1984, when the Cubs got hot, they would let you into games after school for free, by the sixth inning, because there was nobody there.
Right.
Come on in and buy a Coke, it's like,
yeah,
please.
Keep going.
Oh, so what can baseball learn? I don't know. I don't think baseball will ever go back to the way it was in the 70s.
Right.
I think there's so much that's different now, the way the players are used, this whole notion of the relief specialist, that didn't exist in the 70s. In 1976, the Yankees had this guy Dick Tidrow, who his nickname was Dirt, and he was famous for having this really nasty 5 o'clock shadow, and for he could come in and pitch 5-6 innings in relief, no problem. Mm-hmm. Just that's what you need. All right. And you would never have that today. The whole notion of the closer, it wasn't called a closer then, it was a fireman.
Yeah, that's right.
And he would cut, and you wouldn't wait till the 9th inning, with nobody on to bring him in. If your team's in trouble in the 6th or 7th inning, and there's 2 guys on, and you're up by 1 run, and you need to put a lid on this, you bring in your best reliever. And I think so much has changed with the game, with the specialization, with the economics, certainly. I can't see any of that changing for the better.
Right. I think baseball needs a guy like Mark Fidrich.
Well, that's for sure. But it's so. I mean, imagine that Mark Fidrich comes up today. Like I said, he's all over ESPN. By the time he's finished with his second start, there's, with Fidrich, there was a lot of to do about the fact that he was, basically pitching on a rookie minimum salary and making all this money, for the team every time he pitched. His dad essentially was his agent. Okay. So imagine how well that worked out. So now, the Mark Fidrich of today would have a Scott Boras or somebody like that who would, immediately be in there, demanding all this crazy money for personal appearances, wanting to renegotiate the contract halfway through the season. It would become a huge distraction for the new Fidrich. And so much of Fidrich's charm was that he was out there doing it because he loved it. And that was something that really resonated with, especially with Detroit's, working class, mostly unemployed fans. But it really, but in this year where all these players are talking about I'm not signing my contract because at the end of the season I'm going to be a free agent and make a lot of money. He's just happy to be there. And hard to imagine that happening now. Hard to imagine, or if it did happen, hard to imagine that attitude would not get poisoned pretty quickly.
Do you think that the love of the game in the players is still there like it was back then?
I think it depends on the player. I think some of them, yeah, definitely. I think I think the way that it manifests itself is a little different. I think players are much less willing, for the most part, to kind of let their freak flags fly because because there's so much money in jeopardy. There are endorsements. There's they don't want to get, if they're if let's say it's a rookie like Fidrich who comes up and is wacky and on his own trip, that would be, I think a player would be a lot more worried now about being sent down and not earning the shitload of money that awaits.
Well, if they're killing it on the mound, though.
Well, yeah, but I mean, look at Dontrell Willis, for example. And he was not a particularly flamboyant guy, but he had a very flamboyant windup.
Right. And
that first year, and he's amazing, and he has this great windup. And immediately, they start going, the coaches are like, hey, you shouldn't pitch like that. And, everything is so by committee. Our research has shown that you will do this and do that. So I think there's a lot of, there are so many different forces at work that intentionally or otherwise really sap the players of their individuality, of their style, of their groove. And I think I think mostly you see it's the Latino players who still have that attitude and that flair. But even then, you get a guy like Yasiel Puig who certainly has that in buckets. But it's there are certainly people who are like, oh man, I feel like he's the most exciting player to watch today, even when he screws up. It's just you don't know what's going to happen. He's total wild card. But then there are all these other people who are like, this guy is a disgrace and he doesn't play the game right and somebody needs to step on him. And, I think Bryce Harper to some extent as well, although, he's white, so he doesn't quite get as much criticism for his personal flair.
What do you think about these stories that have been coming out about Puig, about how his history and
it's fascinating,
and all this kind of
stuff.
Well,
and all the bribes he had to pay, and the threats to his family. I mean, I believe all of it. I mean, it's really that there's any situation where you can somehow get a guy to the majors from this really deeply impoverished land. Get a guy who's making 26 cents a day or whatever, and get him in a position where he can make 26 million.
Right.
Like there's going to be sharks everywhere, like looking to help him along, but they want their taste. And I'm sure there are all kinds of other stories about other Cuban ball players who had to go through similar shit. And and I think also, like, it's worth keeping in mind when you come down on Yasiel Puig for not doing this or that right. It's like this guy, he is very literally an alien.
Right. Absolutely.
And he, this is all new to him. And combine that with, having an ego, which any really great athlete is going to have. And, and being young and not particularly, well-versed in, any kind of culture or, manners or way of being beyond what he's used to. I don't know. I think you got to cut the guy some slack.
And, well, he missed the home opener.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
Was it
well,
he didn't say it was traffic.
Yeah, he didn't leave early enough. It's
right.
like that's.
We're in LA. That happens.
Right. It's like you need to leave for the ballpark early. Wherever you're leaving for, you need to leave early in LA. And that was a huge fuck up. And Mattingly was right not to play him.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, like, end of story. Don't be, Bill Plaschke writing like this, somebody needs to, slap some sense into this young man kind of stuff.
Oh man, that's why I get annoyed with sports writers, and that's why I get annoyed with ESPN. I don't watch ESPN. I don't have cable, but
right.
That's besides the point. But it's like mostly one because the treatment of hockey.
Right.
But it's just like God, PTI, and then you got Around the Horn, and just listen to these idiots babble and babble and babble. It's like, just shut up and let them play the game.
Yeah, and to inject any kind of morality into the game, and this goes to the whole steroids thing. Like, it's like to be like, oh, like Barry Bonds is an evil person because he did whatever he did. It's like, you know what? These are all guys just trying to make it. And if I could make the bestseller list by banging steroids, I would totally bang some steroids.
Right. Well, see, my thing with Bonds though is he was a Hall of Fame caliber player before he started taking steroids.
Yeah, and it was probably and pretty obviously his ego led him to do it because he wasn't good enough to be just a Hall of Fame caliber player. At the same time, don't you want the guys on your team to not be content with just being a Hall of Fame caliber player?
Well, I think if you're at that point, it's a little bit different, than being what was that Boone kid that played for Seattle?
Oh, Bob Boone.
Bob Boone, yeah.
Or was it Brett Boone?
Boone,
Bob was his
Bob
dad.
Was the dad. So, Brett Boone is just a scab second baseman. All of a sudden, he comes out and hits 50 home runs.
Right, or like Luis Gonzalez in 2001 as well.
Brady Anderson.
Yeah, that was. I remember looking at the paper going, "What? Brady Anderson?" It's like we had single digits home runs the previous year. Now he's
like Denny Hawking becoming a power hitter.
Yeah, it's and look, I'm not a Bonds apologist. I'm not pro steroids per se. I just think like let's deal with this for what this is and take the morality out of the equation, because that's a whole other.
Well, and then you got these people who are whining about a couple weeks ago, the dude, I can't remember, was it a Yankees player that had he had pine tar on his
the
hand?
pitcher, yeah.
The pitcher, and then they're all like, well that's illegal, and that's but managers don't say anything because all of their pitchers probably
do it
too.
Right, and everybody's looking for an edge of some sort,
absolutely.
and Gaylord Perry is in the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
And now it's I was explaining this to someone the other day that just because you throw a spitter doesn't mean you're automatically going to be good at it.
Exactly.
And Gaylord Perry was a genius at making the spitter do what he wanted to do. I could wet my fingers and throw a ball, and it's not going to go anywhere near where I want it to go.
Exactly.
And Don Sutton, Dodger, whose greatest season was in 1976. Speaking of which, his nickname was Black and Decker because he always had like various tools of the trade to help him cut the ball or rough it up in certain spots, and there's I think people are more accepting of that sort of thing than steroids because there is an art to it.
Absolutely.
And I think, and I would agree as well. I think hey, if you can make that work for you, I mean, it's just like, throwing a knuckleball. If you can make that work for you, great.
It's like Joe Negro when they were checking him and all of a sudden his file flew out of his back pocket. It shows up on Letterman the next night and he had a utility belt on. It's classic shit.
Yeah, no, and that's the stuff I love, and that's so much of this book is about that kind of things where it's like these incidents on the field, these stories, like that to me is much more interesting than like getting into crunching the advanced stats or talking ad nauseum about steroids or other performance enhancing drugs. It's like, like the game that happens on the field, the stuff that happens, like the fights in the clubhouse, the owner kind of inserting himself into the picture where he's not wanted. Like this is all the shit I love, and so I really kind of packed Stars and Strikes full of as much of that as could fit.
I cannot wait to read it. When does it come out?
It comes out April 29th.
Okay, and all your regular booksellers, Amazon.
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's coming out through St. Martin's Press. So if your local bookstore doesn't have it, they can certainly order it for you.
Absolutely, and you have a website? Yeah,
bighairplasticgrass.com. Also, I'm on Twitter, Big Hair Plasgrass.
Yep.
And there are Facebook pages both for Big Hair and Plastic Grass and for Stars and Strikes. Look those up and get your daily dose of 70s baseball awesomeness.
And you are going to be out on a book tour also.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing a couple of 3 events in LA this in May. May 3rd at the Allendale Library in Pasadena. May 15th at Joxer Dailies, which is a sports bar in Culver City, and May 17th at Skylight Books in Los Feliz.
Okay, and then you're actually getting out across the country too.
Yeah, I'll be doing some stuff in Chicago, both in June and August. I'm actually getting married June 22nd, and my bride-to-be, bless her heart, has consented to make the first part of our honeymoon be my book promotion tour. so we're getting, we're getting married, and then like the next day we'll be in Philadelphia eating cheesesteaks and promoting.
So jealous.
Yeah.
Don't go to any of the 2 big ones.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It's like you're better. There's so many better ones to go to than that.
That's what I've heard too. I've never been.
Nor have I. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Jealous. You're gonna run the stairs and do the whole Rocky thing too?
Yeah, probably not.
Walk the stairs and do the whole Rocky
that might be a little more my speed. But then we're gonna hit New York. Doing a thing at Manitoba's Bar, which one of my favorite dives in the East Village. I got an invitation to read at Cooperstown, so we're gonna go up there.
That's badass.
And go up to, and I'm still working on solidifying something for Boston, but that's going to happen as well.
That's awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Epstein, you are welcome anytime you want to come back.
Dude, this was a blast. I'd be happy to return.
I would love to have you. We'll talk when you get back from your book tour, and we'll make it happen anytime.
Sweet.
Just say, Izzy, I want to do the show. All right, cool.
I got something I want to talk about, man.
That's right. The book is Stars and Strikes, Baseball in America.
In the Bicentennial Summer of 76.
That's right. Check it out. Check out rockstarleatherworks.com. Get yourself a leather band or a watch that is just badass. I'm going to show Dan mine here in a second. Watch. I'm going to show him my watch.
Yeah, let's make that real clear.
Yes, real clear. Hairballonline.com. They got some big dates coming up. And, of course, check out the KISS podcast. 3 Sides of the Coin. I'll get you in touch with those guys, too. I think you would have a blast on that one. Have you ever heard that show?
I'm sorry, I was just spacing out.
No, have you ever heard the 3 Sides of the Coin?
No, I haven't, actually.
Dude, you'll love it. You'll absolutely. I'll get you in touch with those guys.
Sweet.
I think you would have an absolute blast. I will see you next week. Not exactly sure who I have coming in, but I know Todd LaTorre lined up from Queensryche in a couple weeks, and we'll see you then. Oh yeah, and check out, I got a new sports podcast too that I'm working on. That's not exactly as good as I want it to be, but we'll get there. So, see you next week. I do love you all.